Hey everyone, my name's Alexa, and this is my major presentation following my major paper on the 2 leaders that we had to compare in any area of interest. And the area of interest I chose was in the pharmaceutical area. As most of you may know, I am a fourth-year pharmacy student at MUSC, so this is my actually third degree that I'm attempting at getting, but I'm actually completing both degrees at the same time. So I chose the area of the pharmaceutical industry because I found that to be very interesting as it pertained a lot to me. The 2 leaders that I chose to compare was the CEO of Johnson & Johnson, and he was a previous CEO. He is not the current one. His name was James E. Burke. And the other CEO that I wanted to compare him to was the Mylan Pharmaceutical CEO. Her name is Heather Bresch. So just to start off, a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to give you a little bit of background of each CEO and the different events that they've had to deal with in their term as CEO of the 2 pharmaceutical companies. And then from there, I'm going to kind of compare, some of the good things about them, some of the bad things, and really just kind of compare them as to who handled crisis better, who was able to give better explanations, and how they were able to manage the problems that they came about during their times in past and present CEOs. So I'm going to start off first with the Johnson & Johnson CEO, James E. Burke. Some of you may know that back in 1982, while Mr. Burke was CEO, there was an event where there was tampering of Tylenol, and the person who was actually tampering with the Tylenol was never found. However, the actual event that occurred was someone had laced the Tylenol with cyanide in the first event, and this caused the death of 7 people in Chicago. This was a major event that had happened within history, and even in my time of pharmacy school, I'd learned about this. And Mr. Burke was very, very quick to come up with new, innovative ideas as to how he was going to make some sort of resolution from this event. So his first major thing that he did was notify the public, notify his customers of what was going on, because clearly this was on his product and he was willing to take responsibility, and he was very quick to make sure that the public knew about what was going on so he could inform them, do not buy Tylenol. The next step that he took was actually recalling millions and millions of bottles of Tylenol. And this actually costed the company millions of dollars. And there were some government agencies who felt that Mr. Burke's overreaction of recalling that many bottles of Tylenol was a little bit too much of an overreaction. But his mentality of it was that he wanted to make sure that his customers' safety was put first. And he thought about the repercussions later on as to how it would affect the company. His main concern was the safety of the public. So from this event, he actually decided that he was going to implement some type of tamper-evident packaging on the bottles of Tylenol. That way, if anyone was trying to mess with it, it would be very clear so that the customer wouldn't buy it and they could turn it in to somebody and let them know, hey, this has been tampered with, this has been open. And that way people wouldn't run the risk of buying it because, God forbid, someone else had tried tampering with it again and hurting somebody. So a couple of years later, the same thing happened in a different city, and Mr. Burke was very quick again to come up with a resolution. And from the second event, he actually decided to get rid of the capsule dosage form completely, and instead he formulated a caplet form. So it was in the shape of a capsule, however, it was still in the form of a pill so that people couldn't open up the capsules, put something in it, and then close the bottle up and end up hurting somebody. So throughout his time of CEO, he was very, very innovative. He came up with new ideas. He was very informative to the public. He made sure that all of his customers knew what was going on, and he put the safety of his customers first, even though it cost the company millions of dollars to recall all of these bottles of Tylenol. Even though they knew that probably not all of them had been tampered with, and there was a good chance that it was only in that one city, he wanted to make sure, he was like, no, I'm going to make sure that everyone's safety is put first. So I definitely commend him for what he's done. The other leader that I decided to compare him to was the Mylan CEO, Heather Bresch. As some of you may know, Mylan has been in the news quite frequently within the past few years regarding the controversy of the price increase of EpiPen. And EpiPen is actually a life-saving medication that doctors prescribe patients who have anaphylactic, severe food, different types of allergies that could cause them to go into anaphylaxis. And the main controversy as to what was going on with the price of EpiPen is that in about 6 to 7 years after Mylan had been given this product and they had come about to own this product, there was a price increase from about $100 for 2 EpiPens to $600 for 2 EpiPens. And I can already tell what you're thinking. Who could afford a $600 medication? Especially with EpiPen, it has to be replaced once a year. The packaging and the expiration dates unfortunately call for it to be re-prescribed. You have to get a new prescription every year, go fill that prescription at the pharmacy. So you're spending $600 at least at a minimum of once a year. And that's if you don't have an anaphylaxis reaction where you might have come in contact with a severe food allergy. So the main issue upon this was, there was legislative meetings where the CEO of Mylan had to go in front of the legislator and explain why on earth there was a huge price increase from $100 to $600. This tremendously impacted the availability of the drug, the chance if patients were even going to be able to afford it, and if not, they run the risk of experiencing anaphylaxis and they have to be rushed to the hospital where there may not be enough time in that case, and there's the possibility of death. And throughout these legislative meetings, it was asked upon her from representatives why these price increases were happening. And she could never really give a good explanation of why the price was increased. The only thing I could find when I was doing my research that she was explaining was that Mylan doesn't see all of that money, and it's an expensive medication to manufacture. And it actually is that the Mylan company only saw about $250 of the $600 because there were other entities who were receiving a piece of that $600, was her argument. However, one of the legislative representatives pretty much called her out and said, your financial documents that you turned into us are not coinciding with what you're saying, that you're not seeing all of this money, pretty much. And another thing they wanted to point out to her is the fact that she went from making in a short amount of time about $6 million a year to over $18 million in a yearly salary. That is a huge jump. So when I was comparing these two leaders and trying to come up with something good about each of them, something bad about each of them, I have to be honest with you, it was very clear as to which CEO was the better at handling communication and crisis management, and who was very bad at handling communication and crisis management. You have on one hand James E. Burke, the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. He was very honest. He had the integrity of a normal human being to put the safety of his customers first. And then on the other hand, you have Heather Bresch, the CEO of Mylan, who makes the EpiPen, and she could never give an actual reasoning as to why there was such a huge price increase for a life-saving medication. This medication could save someone's life if they come in contact with a food allergy, get stung by a bee. This is what helps people survive. And that huge price increase could cost somebody their life. Please tell me, how does that sound fair to you? How on earth is that justifiable? So that was my comparison of my two CEOs, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you so much.